Welcome to the virtual Jewel Box podcast of Tanner's Humanities Center in conjunction with the Check Your Shelves podcast with Utah Humanities. I'm Case Johnstun, director for the Utah Center for the Book and Utah's representative to the Library of Congress, and the host of Check Your Shelves podcast with Utah Humanities. We usually record from downtown Ogden, Utah on historical 25th Street, but today we are recording in my home, which is just as lovely, but not as technically wonderful. But today our guest is two-time National Book Award winner, Jesmyn Ward. And while right before this email, or right before this podcast, I sent an email to somebody at Utah State saying I'm going to be a few minutes late because, I'm interviewing Jesmyn Ward. And they said, they sent back an email, said, oh, yeah, just no big deal. And I said, yeah, yeah. So it was pretty funny exchange. Ward is the author of Salvage the Bones, one of my favorite books pre-COVID, top 10 favorite books pre-COVID, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And Sing, Unburied Sing, both winners of the National Book Award, as well as editor of the influential anthology The Fire This Time, A New Generation Speaks About Race. Her work explores the rural South, race, environmental justice, and historical memory. Her most recent novel, Let Us Descend, an Oprah Book Club pick, was named one of the year's best books by the Washington Post, Time, The New Yorker, and others, and Case Johnstun, but that didn't get any headlines. The title, drawn from Dante's Inferno, reflects the novel's engagement with history and spirit. NPR described it as the literary equivalent of an open wound from which poetry pours, and we can talk about that later too. Ward is a professor of English and Andrew W. Mellon Professor in the Humanities at Tulane University. And I have to give a shout out to the Mellon Foundation, who saved the Humanities Councils across the country this year when we got cut by Doge. The Mellon Foundation gave a donation and a match to all the Humanities Councils, which is why I still have a job. So I have to give a shout out to that foundation. So, welcome, Jesmyn. I am so glad to have you, as I am trying not to show everybody that I'm kind of fanning.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, how is it there? Where are you right now?
I'm in Mississippi. I'm at home, actually. It is it the summer season is hanging on for us, unfortunately. But it's cool. It's a little cool in the mornings, which is nice. So I don't know. We're just trying to make it through the end of hurricane season without
Yeah,
any storms, really.
yeah.
Yeah.
Still really humid.
Yeah, still well, it's drier, which is nice. The humidity has lifted a little bit, but I think we're getting some weather this weekend, like some rain. So it always, even in the fall, it always gets humid again, like right before it rains. So
Yeah,
not, I don't know. We're not in the easy sort of winter months yet.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, you'll come to Utah next week, which is
Yeah.
Utah couldn't be happier, and I will speak just for Utah, the entire state. But Utah couldn't be happier. I am stoked. Where you will come, I would bring lotion because it is the second driest state in the nation. And
First,
it's what's that?
I said, what's the first?
Nevada.
Oh, okay.
So we have the second driest climate and the second least rainfall in the
Oh,
nation too.
okay.
And so yeah, Utah's it's a very dry place. So, bring lotion. It'll be you will be coming from humidity, which you don't think is humidity, to very, very dry at 1%. And so, but we are so excited to have you. Um, so I've taught Salvage the Bones for more than a decade, which is really, really cool. And I don't teach for the university or at the high schools anymore, but I teach at the Lighthouse out of Denver, which I absolutely love teaching. And I teach a book or I teach a class called Writing the Novel, and students get to pick a mentor book to kind of highlight and outline. And a lot of my students have picked Salvage the Bones and other books, not as many pick
Yeah.
some of your other books as Salvage the Bones. Maybe it's just because it's been around longer, as their mentor book to highlight, outline, and follow kind of the
Huh.
writing, which is really, really cool. I love teaching it because students get to tell me why it's their mentor book, and that's really, really cool. Um, but I have a couple questions, and we might not get through three of them. As you can tell, I'm chatty and excited, so we could just
It's all
we could
good.
just talk back and forth. But this one really, and then this one stems from, you know, being a writer outside of New York City, being a writer outside of LA, um, and a successful writer. You know what I mean? That like somebody who nationally known, respected, taught in classes like mine. Um, when it comes to place-based writing, um,
Mhm.
like so many, I've heard so many budding writers told, or they'll come to me with somebody told them, um, to not stick with writing what they know. And you know what I mean. You know the advice I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And to expand outward from there. And they're told this because these teachers believe that writers writing about places that people don't know will not sell.
Mm.
Won't sell books. I believe both these pieces are advice are wrong. So, but if you think they're correct, go for it. But you have proven obviously that leaning into both of these can not only be rich in story, like right. I
Mhm.
mean, culture and place and people that a lot of the country never gets to see in literature. It can be so rich, but also win National Book Awards, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts kind of on this advice? My Check Yourselves kind of goes into advice for budding writers. What are your thoughts on this advice, and what do you say to budding writers about to correct this form of these kind of decisions and experience when they're jumping in?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to follow what you love in your writing. I mean, I think that is what I've held on to throughout my entire career, right? Like I love to write about the people I grew up with and people who live in my hometown and in my state and in my region. Um, and so I remain there, because that place and that people, they really inspire me. I mean, I guess I could have taken that advice and branched out, but I don't know. I feel like my heart wouldn't have necessarily been in it because that wasn't where I was getting my inspiration. That wasn't I wouldn't be writing about the place and the people that like spark my curiosity and my inquisitiveness and that make me want to, I don't know, explore people and human behavior. So I don't know. So I mean, I feel like I understand the intent behind that advice, right? Because this is a difficult industry to succeed in, right? And so I think, people who give that kind of advice may think that they're helping writers to clear one roadblock that they might have in working successfully, in this industry and in, creating compelling work. But I think, that if if you love what you are writing about and if it genuinely moves you, then I don't know, I think that will bear out in the work. I think that readers will respond to that. I think it'll find that kind of work, that is organic to you and that you love. If you put it out in the world, that it will find the readers, who need those stories and it'll resonate with them. And I think, and I tell, because I teach creative writing too. And so one of the things that I always tell my students is that um and this is not my original thought at all, right? I've sort of pieced this together from various craft books that I've read. um but one of the things that I always teach and that I learned in the creative writing classroom is that is that one of the things that you are attempting or that you should attempt to do in your work is to write the particular, write the specific, way to write in a voice that reflects you as an author and your particular vision, and of what you and your particular sort of, I guess, understanding, of what you see in the world. And um, the richer your work is, the more it's like rooted in specific details that are like of a specific experience. The it like it when readers find it and it resonates with them, it makes them feel like the experience is universal, right? Because
Mhm.
you sort of they believe that this person that they're reading about and this place that they're reading about, which may be strange to them, but if it's specific and if it's detailed enough and if it's rich enough, then it becomes compelling to them, and it becomes present, and they identify with it and they empathize with the characters. And so I don't know, like I believe that to be true. And so I don't know, I think that that's what I attempt to do in all of my work, and that's what I would tell students, that the power comes in creating a rich, detailed, specific world, right, that is particular to you and to the people in the place that you're writing about. And if you do that well enough, then your reader is going to feel empathy, even if you're not writing about, even if you're not writing from New York, or you're not writing from
Mhm.
LA, or a place that looms largely, that looms in the American imagination, I guess.
Right. Right. I'm going to get that transcribed, and share it, because, and I wonder too if it takes authors like you, um, you know, to really show that these places have that global appeal because of the people and the people and places that you describe so richly. I mean, maybe it's just breaking that mold to show everyone that New York isn't the only place where cool things happen.
Right. And I think when I was younger, I mean, because it wasn't easy for me to uh sort of break into publishing and into the publishing industry that's like based in New York City. That was a difficult experience for me. Um, so much so that my second novel was my first book that was actually published by like a New York publisher. My first
Hmm.
book was published with a small independent press out of Chicago called Agate. But a great, like a small independent publisher, but didn't necessarily have the kind of resources that the larger publishers do. And so part of the pushback that I was getting um, with my first novel, when before it was published, when I was like shopping it around to the larger publishers, was they couldn't see an audience for it. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what they were saying in so many words. Like they just didn't think that, because of the people I was writing about, that people would want to read it. And I think, through the years that I sort of heard that sentiment expressed in different ways, that I sort of internalized it a little bit, right? Like, you
sure.
know, I I was I wanted to find my readers, but I assumed that I would only have a few readers, right? But I would love them, but I would only have a few. And so, and I didn't so I think that the first time that I realized that that what I was saying earlier is that's truth to what I was saying earlier, right? About like creating a, specific, detailed, rich work, and rendering an experience vividly, that allows people who have nothing, hardly anything in common with you that enables the work to resonate with them.
Hmm.
I went to New Zealand. I was attending the Auckland Book Festival, or the Auckland Festival of Books, and I met readers there who they read Salvage the Bones and the Christchurch earthquakes. Do you remember this is some
Yes.
yeah, right after so I think Salvage the Bones came out. That's when the Christchurch earthquakes happened. And so they came up to me, and there was a whole group of women, and they were like, they just said, "Oh, we love this book so much, and we embraced it, and you know, it we identified with it so much, because in part because of the earthquakes, because we
Hmm.
experienced these devastating sort of natural disaster, in the same way that the characters in Salvage the Bones did. And so they just, it." it moved them. It meant something to them. And so that was, I think, was one of the first times where I was like, huh, like it doesn't, you know, the my work doesn't necessarily it didn't have to be set in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
And feature people who looked like them and who were from the same backgrounds in order for them to feel something when they read it. So yeah, I mean, I stand by that. I think that, you know, that idea. Yeah, because I think it's true.
Well, you give hope, honestly. You give a lot of hope to, um, you know, you give a lot of hope to writers and to readers that, you know, there's so many stories and rich stories across this country, across this globe that people haven't told yet. And when they are told, they can connect across the country and connect across the globe deeper than the ones that have been told forever. And I mean, that's uh, the reason I love your books for that reason. I love your books for that reason that you have this deeply entrenched knowledge and love of place. And I going back to what you said at the very beginning, I don't think you can have that unless you truly unless you truly believe in that place or know that place or explore that place or you have characters do it. And that's, and that again comes out in that poetry of prose, right? You can't define a place in poetry unless you know it well. And I mean, I think that's what, as a literary author, I get stuck in your paragraphs, because they're
Mm.
just gorgeous. And I get stuck with your characters because they're just huge on the page. Which leads me to my next question, which you kind of brought up because we got about 8 minutes. And I'm gonna mess up this quote, but the essence is true. Like, you know how we always mess up quotes. I know it's out there, and somebody said it well, much better than me.
Right.
Uh, um, every character you write has a part of you in them and part of someone you know in them. So that's the first part of the question. How do you see this? And do some books protagonists live this more fully? You know?
Hmm.
And is there or and is there a point where they get away from that, if that makes any sense?
Hmm. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I think I think that that is true. The reason I think that it's true is because one, I am like I'm inspired by the people who I have around, like the people that I have around me, right? And
Mhm.
so, you know, even though none of the characters that I've written, except in my memoir, my creative
Right.
nonfiction, right?
Absolutely.
In
Yeah.
fiction, none of the characters that I've written are resemble someone one to one, right? Like a
Mhm.
thinly veiled representation of a particular person that I know. But I do take, I don't know, I guess characteristics of people that I know and have known, people, in my family community who are no longer here. I do sort of take sort of different aspects of their character and things that I might have noticed about them and use those characteristics to sort of inform and to flesh, I guess, my own characters. Um, I
Do you think there's a purpose to any of it?
well, I think, like when I first started out, when I say when I first started out, I mean when I first began
Mhm.
writing, right? When I first committed to writing, to attempting to write fiction, right? Because that's what it was. The beginning was an attempt. One
Right.
of the right, one of the reasons that I wanted to write, and one of the reasons that I felt like that I had stories, there were stories that I wanted to tell, was because I felt like the people who I knew and who I grew up with, and the people and like the older people in my family who, like my grandmother who, was born in in like 1938, 19, like who was born then and, and lived through, the 40s, 50s, 60s, civil rights movement in the United States. Like, I don't know. I mean, I just feel like I didn't see much um in fiction, right? In the books that I read when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I didn't get as many books as I wanted that where I encountered characters who seemed like people who seemed familiar to me, right? And who seemed like people I knew. And I don't know. And then, I grew up in Mississippi, and I will say that that there was a type of erasure that I felt like I saw happening here. Wi- just in, and I want to say that it was sort of across the board, right? As far as like
Mhm.
what I was learning in the classroom, what I was reading in the newspaper, what I was seeing on the local news channel at night. Um, what, people around the conversations, when I would listen to the conversations that maybe people in the world outside of my community were having about people like me, or people from my town, or
Yeah.
people in my community, there was an erasure there. And I think especially like earlier on in my career, um that erasure was very frank, I feel like.
Mhm.
One of the reasons that I set out to even to write Salvage the Bones was because specifically was because I was home here in Mississippi for Hurricane Katrina on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. It was a very traumatic experience. And but after the hurricane, I overheard several conversations and then had conversations with people who I thought were, cared about me, right?
Yeah.
And understood me. But had these overheard and had these really frustrating conversations with people and they would say things like, why would you ever go back? Why would you rebuild? You know that, there's a hurricane season every year. What is the point if that everything, that whole communities, whole cities, right? That everything can be raised at any moment because of a hurricane. Like, why would you ever go back? And
Right.
that seemed like that was a type of erasure to me because I'm like, you understand absolutely nothing about me or about my family or my community or generations of people that I know who have lived in this area, um, who I don't know, like you've just flattened them, right? And they're in your eyes, just sort of stupid for making this decision to come back to this place that they call home and invest in it and rebuild and and remain rooted here. And so I wanted to write against that. I want to push back against that erasure that I saw everywhere. And so yeah, so in that way, I think that it is purposeful, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that it is purposeful.
Yeah. And as if it's that easy to
Mhm.
just
Right,
not go home,
right. Who
you
can,
know? I mean, as if it's, and as if everybody has the opportunity to just get up and
right,
change their lives,
right,
and out from nothing, as if it's
right,
that easy. And that's not even, and it's not even like it's not even about, it is about money and it is about all those things,
right,
but it's more like you said about that's my home. That's what I know,
right,
and why I want to go back and make it, honestly, people who care, they want to go back and make it better,
right,
and not just ditch it,
right,
in my simplest language, but right, but as if it's that easy to leave.
right,
Like, if that were the truth, I would have been out of Utah 40 years ago.
right.
But yeah. So anyways, Jesmyn, thank you so much. I can't believe how fast that went. But I want to respect your time, and we cannot, as I can speak for all of Utah, we are so grateful to see you next week at the Tanner Institute. Um, thank you again. I can't thank you enough for your time. And I probably will go on Facebook and say I just had a half an hour conversation with Jesmyn Ward, and I, that's just the truth. Why hide it, right? Why, why hide it? You've been listening to the Virtual Jewel Box and Check Your Shelves. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you again, Jesmyn, for joining us for this half an hour. We can't wait to see you in Utah next week.
I'm looking forward to it.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.